I think when you go back and, ask Richard and everything, Dale and Richard really tried to help Dave. Dave did a lot of testing, for RCR and
pretty sure he
especially in the
tested.
3-car. Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure he tested a lot for
Yeah, he
Dale, but I know he tested the Daytona 500 88 or 1998 car.
Really?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Did you know? Yeah,
Dave Marcus tested.
Dave
Marcus tested.
Yeah.
I think
he
Mike
tested
Dillon
that
and
car,
Dave.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Well, we tested all the time for
Yeah.
Dale. And so that sounds pretty much par for the course, because in 2000 I started doing the testing for Dale, and we because Dale would never, if it wasn't Indy or it wasn't the Daytona test before the 500, he was not going to test. And at that particular time, you couldn't.
Yeah.
There was no limit. Like, you just went to the racetrack. So we lived at Talladega and Daytona testing.
Yeah.
And that kind of branched off in 2000 over into doing the testing with General Motors. They were trying to develop a new shock system and new suspension and everything that we had going on. So really during 2000, we did all the testing, and the first, we would spend like 2 or 3 days a week at Kentucky doing the downforce testing. So we took that car that we were testing, and they actually took my seat out of it. It was actually one of Dale's cars. And so we took the seat out of it, put his seat back in it, and they took it to Indianapolis. They got it to Indy, and they unloaded both cars, and Dale gets there, and he goes out in his car and makes a run, and they said, okay, now get in this car, and goes out and runs 0.9 of a second faster than he did in his car. So we've been working on this stuff for months and months and months, and comes back in, and they said, wow, that was a lot better. And he said, well, what's in this car? And at that point, like Dale and Rusty and all those guys, they were very into the springs and the shocks and everything that was happening on their cars. So they had this kind of common mindset of, well, it needs a 800-pound spring, a 900-pound spring, 250, whatever that was at that particular time. Well, this car was nothing like that. It was really the kind of the next generation of springs and shocks and suspension and the way that it was. And they told him, I said, well, it's got 3 500-pound springs and a 200-pound spring in the back. And by the time they got done, he said, you load this motherfucker in the truck and don't ever bring it back to the racetrack again, because I am not driving anything that has those springs and those shocks in there. And he wouldn't drive it. No, he would not drive it after that particular run. So they put it back in the truck, and he never drove it. And we won a ton of races that year. Well, we continued to develop his car and the suspension and that suspension package, and we took it all the way to the end of the year. Well, at the end of the year, we went to Homestead, and we were the fastest car there. Well, it was towards the end of the year, and he was at a point of saying, hey, might be time, might not be time, didn't really know when he was going to retire. So we were the fastest car at Homestead, and at that time, the media covered the test. So we came into the garage at Phoenix that next weekend, and his first questions, he was just getting hammered with, are you retiring? Why is Harvick testing your car? Your whole team's there with him, because I would take Kevin Hamlin and all of us would go together. And so I go walking through the Cup garage, because I knew that a lot of the stuff was starting to cycle in, and we had kind of started just being able to joke around and kid around. Well, he was not kidding around on this particular day. After his media session, he was mad. He rounded up myself, Richard, Kevin Hamlin, and that particular day, Dale Jr. just accidentally walked into the trailer at the wrong time, and he ripped our butts that day for going and testing, and he needed to be at these tests, and he didn't need to be answering these questions and this and that. And so he came back in, he went out, he practiced good, went out and qualified, ran over the apron, and I went back in the trailer just trying to be a smartass. I went back in the trailer, and he ran over the apron and qualified and kind of screwed the lap up. And I said, hey man, if you need a pillow to see over that steering wheel, just let me know. And that was probably not the right thing to say. So
he didn't react.
He didn't. At that point, I was still pretty young, and it's that generational thing, right? It's a different, you're joking around, but he doesn't think it's respectful to joke around. And so
that's funny.
He would get a little bit offended in some of those situations, but we were having fun. We were young and didn't care.
Hey, race fans, thanks for watching our video. For all NASCAR on Fox News content and the best clips from Fox Sports, be sure to follow and subscribe to our channel.